You know, for decades, whenever global business leaders wanted a masterclass in efficiency, they looked to Japan. But what they're finding now goes way beyond simple buzzwords. There's a systematic approach to management that's attracting some really intense new interest. We are, of course, talking about Kaizen, a philosophy that basically turns the traditional top-down corporate structure on its head. So in this explainer, we're going to decode the operational secret behind Japan's really formidable competitive edge.
Picture this. An American engineer is touring a Japanese auto plant, and he's just stunned. He watches the frontline workers, the people actually building the cars, spot a flaw in the process, brainstorm an improvement, and then implement it themselves right there on the spot. He said later it was like magic, because it was such a huge contrast to the rigid top-down commands he was used to back home.
And that right there, that's the central mystery we're going to unpack. How does a system that's built on what seem like tiny incremental changes from the ground up, how does that create such a powerful world-class competitive advantage? Well, the answer lies in a really deep cultural and systematic commitment to empowering every single employee.
So here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at that so-called magic on the factory floor from a more global perspective. Then we'll decode the philosophy behind it, break down the system that actually makes it work, see how it applies way beyond manufacturing, and finally figure out how you turn this whole process into measurable profit.
All right, so to really understand Kaizen, you first have to grasp the fundamental shift it represents. See, instead of strategy being this thing that's handed down from the boardroom, it becomes a living, breathing system that actually bubbles up from the factory floor, or the service desk, or the engineering team.
And this isn't just an internal Japanese perspective. The rest of the world is really taking notice. You can see global conversations on platforms like Reddit that show this growing frustration with clunky, top-down ways of doing things. At the same time, you've got international business publications analyzing these unique Japanese structures, like the Ringi system. That's a formal process where proposals actually start at the lowest levels and work their way up. It all points to creating what experts call a living system of continuous improvement.
But to truly get it, we've got to go beyond just a simple translation. Kaizen, it doesn't just mean improvement. No, it's a much deeper cultural and operational philosophy. Okay, so at its core, Kaizen is this belief that real sustainable growth comes from empowering the person who knows the job best, which is the person actually doing the job. It basically treats every single employee like an expert in their own little world, giving them the trust and the tools to constantly find problems and fix them. The key takeaway here is that it's not about a one-off suggestion box. It's an ongoing, deeply embedded cultural practice.
Now, a philosophy is one thing, but making it actually work, well, that requires a really robust system. Kaizen isn't just a vague mindset. It's a structured methodology built on 4 absolutely essential pillars. Let's take a look at how this is actually built.
First, you have authority delegation. This means frontline workers have to be given the actual power to make changes. Step 2 is continuous learning. The company has to invest in training so that employees have the skills to solve problems well. Third, and this one's huge, is information sharing. Successes, failures, everything gets communicated across the whole organization so everybody gets smarter. And finally, evaluation and rewards. The system has to recognize and incentivize these contributions, which is what motivates everyone to actually take part.
And this brings us to a really critical distinction. As you can see here, the ideal is an empowered team that's supported by a genuine management culture that fosters this kind of thinking. But the common pitfall, and we see this a lot when international firms try to copy this model, is that they treat Kaizen like some simple toolkit for efficiency. But without that deep cultural investment, without that trust and empowerment from the top, well, the whole thing is just destined to fail. And that cultural commitment, that's precisely why Kaizen's principles can be applied far beyond the factory floor. The core idea of empowering the front line, that's universal. It doesn't matter if your front line is a production line, a software dev team, or a customer service count.
For instance, think about the B2B software world. A Kaizen approach means you empower your development teams to act directly on customer feedback. What does that do? It shortens the loop between a user's problem and a real deployed solution, which dramatically speeds up feature improvements and, of course, customer satisfaction.
It's the same thing in IT services. Instead of some manager leading a top-down investigation after a system outage, you let the engineers who actually fix the problem lead the root cause analysis. This makes sure that the people with the most intimate knowledge of the system are the ones designing the permanent fix, so it never, ever happens again.
And this logic is just as true in places like retail and hospitality.
The staff who are interacting with your customers every single day, well, they become your most valuable source of market intelligence, period. Empowering them to propose changes based on those interactions leads directly to a better customer experience and, you guessed it, more revenue.
Of course, for any business leader, for any investor, the really critical question is this: how do you measure the return on this kind of cultural investment? A true Kaizen system isn't just about good vibes, it's about delivering tangible, measurable results.
As you can see in this table, success gets tracked across 4 key vectors. So, externally, you're measuring customer satisfaction to quantify the impact on your user. Internally, you're tracking employee engagement to see how healthy your innovation culture is. And, crucially, these are connected directly to the bottom line by measuring both cost reduction from new efficiencies and revenue growth driven by better products and services.
So, we'll leave you with this final thought. In today's world of constant disruption, the old assumption that all the best ideas come from the boardroom, well, that's becoming a dangerously outdated way of thinking. Your company's next breakthrough product, your next game-changing efficiency, it might already exist in the mind of an employee on your front line. The real question is your organization actually built to hear it?